Good evening and welcome to the Public Library. This is a cornerstone of democracy and freedom, and we welcome you here for this very important debate tonight. My name is Bill Nelson. I'm the director of the library, and it's my privilege to kick this off. I would like to mention that this is a collaborative effort between the League of Women Voters and the library. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Judith Kirk, who's the president of the League, to just say a few words.
Thank you, and I want to express my appreciation on behalf of the League for the collaborative work we've done with the library for this series this fall. And it's been a very good thing. A brief word about the League of Women Voters. Some of you may not know about us. We were founded in 1920, and it was rooted in that movement that got women the right to vote. But over time, both men and women and the work they do has evolved to ensuring that all people have the right to vote and that they can exercise it with intelligence. In other words, they become educated about it. The League's mission is democracy at work, and educated and informed workers, educated and informed voters is the key to democracy. Our work is to protect voters, and it includes voting rights, improving elections, and educating and engaging voters. Local League of Women Voters across the country host hundreds of candidate debates and forums every election year. And they provide straightforward information about candidates and ballot issues. You're here tonight, so I already know that you're an engaged voter. And the League works all year, every year, to empower eligible voters to participate in the political system. We have information for you about the League in the back, and we'd be glad to answer any questions you may have. If you have questions, and Bill may mention this, there are cards in the back that you can put your question on. We'll take it up to the moderator.
Thank you, Judith. Just a few folks I'd like to thank tonight for being here. Number one, the participants, the candidates. Thank you for stepping out and being leaders in our community. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank Betsy O'Neill, a member of the library board, who was last year's Wyoming Librarian of the Year, who helped organize this presentation tonight. So thank you, Betsy. And lastly, Carol Crump, our moderator this evening, that I'll get back to in just a second. There are a couple of points I'd like to advertise very briefly. 2 weeks from tonight, on the 20th, we will have a similar and our last forum for this election with the county commission candidates. It will be October 20th, same time, same kind of a setup. And another thing that's coming up with the library, this Wednesday night we have a tech rally happening where we will be showcasing a number of mobile devices. We will have a petting zoo. If you'd like to touch different things, then you'd like to do that. So please feel free to come. That's from 5:30 to 8 o'clock this Wednesday. As Judith mentioned, if you do have a question, by all means go to the back of the room. There are index cards. Fill out the question, and Carol will attempt to put those into the forum this evening. It is also being videoed. So hopefully by tomorrow or the next day we will have this online at the library website, so that if you are interested or your friends are interested in hearing what is said this evening, they can go online and hear the entire forum. So with that, I'd like to introduce a little more formally our moderator this evening, Carol Crump. For those that don't know Carol, she's a longtime Wyoming resident. She's a Casper College UW graduate, and most notably was a member of the City Council between 1994 and 1998. So she's been in the rough and tumble of local politics for quite some time. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Carol, and thank you again for leading us this evening.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Judith. First of all, we better do some rules of the road. There are only 4 candidates, so we should be able to get through the many questions that I already have. You'll notice Betsy and Dan Grace are sitting over to my right. They are your timekeepers. when the flowered plate gets waved at you, you have 15 seconds more to go. When the red plate gets waved at you, you will stop. As everyone who has ever dealt with me at a forum before realizes, I will make you stop. So I'm not being rude, but we're trying very hard to stick to our 1 minute per question answer and make sure we get as many questions in as we possibly can. The audience will notice that Mr. Slayton is not here. Mr. Slayton is making up his mind whether he wants to come to the forum or not, so he may still show up. If he does show up, we will incorporate him and let him take part just as if he were here from the beginning. We don't want to give any candidate less of an opportunity to connect with the voters as much as they can. I will rotate through letting each of you answer a question first so that no one appears to get an advantage one over the other. Most of the time, these questions are pretty general that anyone can answer, hopefully. So we will ask everyone each question. I would encourage you to think of new answers rather than just repeat what the guy next to you says. We've had some discussion with spectators before that they say, it gets so boring, they all say the same thing. So think of something new. Think of something that the voters might not have heard from the person sitting next to you. The first question we're going to give you 2 minutes to answer. That is your introduction. So introduce yourself, and also what we want to know from you in this first question that you have 2 minutes to answer is what motivates you to be a Natrona County School District Board member? Let's start with you, Debbie.
I was afraid you were going to say that. Good evening. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and Bill Nelson and the library for having us tonight. My name is Debbie McCullar, and I am a Casper girl, born and bred. I graduated from NCHS. I attended and graduated from the University of Wyoming with a degree in English education with a minor in remedial reading. And I have been teaching kids the art of language in this district for the past 37 years. My interest in running for the position is that I hope to bring some reality to what happens in the classroom and what it's like being a classroom teacher these days in light of the data-driven system that we're trying to work within. The expertise I have besides my classroom instruction experience are many opportunities that I've had because I was employed in this district. I led groups of students to Taiwan for 6 different years as part of the Taiwan Student Exchange, for which I was the chairman of that committee for the city. I have done Teen Leadership Coalition, which is a leadership program for kids, teaching them the understanding that as people we are more alike than we are different, and helping kids find those commonalities. I have worked with the state as a consultant on both developing the YCAS test, the PAWS test, and on scoring the assessment, setting benchmarks. And so I have a lot of expertise dating back to 1993 when I was selected by this district to go to Cheyenne and work with other teachers developing the language arts standards.
And you're out of time.
Thank you.
Dr. Jensen.
My name is Clark Jensen. I am an optometrist by profession. I'm also the father of 9 kids. I know that isn't politically correct, but we have a large family, and all of our children have been products of the Natrona County School District. 3 of them graduated from Kelly Walsh, 6 of them graduated from ANC, and they have all been, for the most part, had a good experience in the school system. Last year, I was involved with trying to see that the school bond passed. We didn't succeed, but in the process of that, experience. I had opportunity to work with school board members, the trustees here in Natrona County, and found them to be good people who were trying to do their best to help educate kids. And so after that event was over, I was asked by one of the trustees if I'd be willing to run for school board. My initial reaction was, no, I really don't think I want to do that. But as time went by, I felt like it was time for me to give something back. My kids have graduated from school. My youngest is no longer a student, and so I have a little more time. My son has joined my practice, and so I have a little more time there as well. And so it's just time for me to try to do something to give back to the community. I don't have an axe to grind. I just think that my perspective is of value as both a father who's had kids go through school and also as a businessman who understands the value of a dollar. So I want to see if I can help. Thank you.
Ms. Billings,
Well, I'm Toni Billings, and if it appears that I'm nervous,
move the microphone a little closer
if it
to you,
appears
please.
that I'm nervous, it's because I am. My experience is not in talking to grown-ups. My experience is in talking with much shorter people. I am a former teacher of Natrona County School District. I spent 22 years as a teacher here, most of which I felt was very rewarding. I enjoyed very much my time in the classroom. I loved the children. I loved what I did. Over the course of the last 10 years of my career, I started to struggle with that love. Part of that was just a change in the climate, if you will, of what I felt in the classroom, the way that I felt appreciated by a lot of different things. And so being blessed to be able to retire early from the field I did, and I also come at this from a perspective as a parent. I have 2 children and 4 stepchildren, so politically correct or not, half a dozen of them, most of which have attended at least some time in Natrona County, and feel that this district is an excellent district, a district that has focused on excellence for a very long time. My perspective as still a parent and a grandparent, I now have grandchildren, and I find my daughter thinking about homeschooling her children, and that kind of moved me to say, you know, maybe I could do something in this position. I am not a political person by nature at all. You can ask my husband, he's like, you should watch this and you should read this, and I'm like, I don't know, that's, you know, but I feel like this is a position that's more about children than any sort of politics. And as far as my motivation is kids. I want teaching in Natrona County to be first and foremost about our children, about the students that we send into those classrooms every day.
Thank you. Mr. Applegate.
Thanks. I'd like to thank the Library and League of Women Voters and the other candidates too for their willingness to do this. I've been on the board for 4 years, and I ran for the board originally, and I'm running for the board again because I'm passionate about education. I think it's such a fundamentally important institution, both for individuals to provide kids opportunity, and also important to our country in terms of civic responsibility and participation in our economic system. So I think it's critically important. I think generally I've tried to bring to the board as an attitude of problem solving, being a good listener, sort of a lifelong learner. You know, in my private experience, I'm an engineer. I went to the University of Wyoming, grew up in Glen Rock. I've had to work in sort of settings that have multiple stakeholders. I was involved in the Amoco cleanup project for 7 years, and I now work for an oil and gas company and spend all my time on sage grouse. And so I've always kind of been involved in projects that have, I guess, some controversy and multiple opinions. And I just think if you work hard and you listen, you can try to meet multiple interests and try to solve problems, and that's what I try to bring to the table. You know, specifically when I ran for the board previously, I was really interested in the construction projects, and I thought I could add value in helping us navigate through that maze of construction. I think I have added value on that. The projects are underway. I tell Superintendent Hopkins every time we get past a hurdle there will be another one. That's the nature of very large construction projects. I'd really like to see these projects through to conclusion. I think the board has excellent leadership in our district, and Superintendent Hopkins, I'd like to take credit as a board for that decision. I think we made an excellent choice. And there's just some things that I would like to finish up over the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to switch to 1-minute answers as we get into some of the particulars about being a school board member. We'll start with an easy one. What kind of assets do you bring to the board that no one else currently has on the board? We'll start with you, Dr. Jensen.
9 kids.
Maybe you don't need a whole minute.
And truly, that's probably my biggest asset, is I've seen my kids have attended lots of different schools in lots of different places, and we've been exposed to lots of different problems. But also, you know, I think that Dave has a business background as well, so maybe that's something that I have to offer. I don't know that I have anything that's maybe unique as far as abilities, except willingness to work with other people, and I think I do a good job of getting along with folks and being able to work through things and form coalitions, so that's I guess what I have to say.
Thank you. Ms. Billings.
Well, I would say that I have a multifaceted experience in Natrona County. I grew up here, and so I went through the school district. I'm a product of Natrona County School District and the University of Wyoming, and I am a hometown girl. I left and I came back. I missed this community, and I missed the people, and I missed just what Casper has to offer, and perhaps other people are natives as well their whole life. But for me, I think I bring a teaching perspective, especially an elementary one, and being fresh out of the classroom, fresh out of what is currently going on in our classrooms today as we deal with a lot of different issues that were different 10 years ago or 20 years ago. You know, families are different. Our world is a different place. Technology has changed that dramatically, and I think that perspective that I have from a lot of different ways of looking at things, and I'm a good listener, and I want to work with people. I get along well with others, so I think it said that on my kindergarten report card. Like, get along well with others.
Mr. Applegate.
Yeah, again, I'm not sure I bring anything that's unique. I think the board always has been served well by having a diversity on the board. And so I think I sort of contribute in a way to that diversity. There's a couple of us that have kids. I have kids in the district still. I have a freshman. When I ran 4 years ago, I had a grade schooler, a middle schooler, and a high schooler. Now I have 2 in high school, so a freshman and a senior. So I think that's important. You know, a lot of the issues we talk about aren't abstractions for me. I'm living the academy deployment with my own kids. I have an engineering background, so that's sort of a different technical background that I bring to the board that I think, again, has helped in the construction area. And this year I've been the board chairman, and I've had the opportunity to talk to various groups, and I've always emphasized my own passion for learning. I'm an avid reader, and so I think by being an avid reader in areas outside of my expertise, it helps me sort of bring sometimes a unique perspective to problems.
Thank you. Ms. McCullar.
Well, a couple different things that I think will benefit the board. Again, my work with the state in the area of assessment and setting standards. And additionally, the fact that I served on the executive committee for the National Council of Teachers of English. It was an elected position. And I had the opportunity to rub shoulders with some of the finest literacy experts in this country. And I learned a lot from them. So I would say that I can beat Clark on the 9 kids. I've had over 5,000 kids. And have loved every single one of them.
Thank you. We're going to get to some particulars here. We'll start with you, Ms. Billings. What is your position on the CAPS Academy?
Well, my position is limited in that I'm not living it. I've been trying to find out as much as I can about it since deciding to run for the school board. From what I understand of the program, it seems to be giving children a lot of options in high school, options to explore things. I think as long as it's implemented as I understand it to be, it will give kids the opportunity to explore some different career fields if they have a desire to do that. I don't feel like it's right to pigeonhole children at a, a sophomore level in high school and say, well, you chose automotive and now there you go. I have a 19-and-a-half-year-old who still isn't sure. And quite frankly, I'm not sure I know what I want to be when I grow up. So I feel like the program generally will give our children more options in high school and hopefully increase their engagement and hopefully increase their graduation rate. I mean, that to me is my understanding of the program, and if it does that, then I feel positively about it.
Mr. Applegate.
Yeah, I'm a supporter of the Academy and CAPS. I really believe that we're serving a lot of students well, but we have about 25% of our kids that don't graduate. We need to engage more kids. I'm really concerned about boys. Full disclosure, I have both boys and a girl, but our graduation rate for boys is even lower. I feel like not all, but at least an aspect of the CAPS is a sort of hands-on learning, more experience in the workplace, and it is about trying to engage kids, getting them interested. It's voluntary, but I think if we can get kids in these academies and working projects and this progressive electives in CAPS, that we can help kids stay in school. So I'm a strong supporter of it.
Thank you. Ms. McCullar.
I believe I'm a supporter of CAPS, but it's really hard to find out what's going on. I think one of the weaknesses that I see in the district is communication. Maybe from the curriculum department to teachers that can filter out a little bit. But when I go out and talk to teachers, the majority of them don't have a clue what the program is going to end up looking like. So I would hope that we could all do a little better job of increasing communication.
Mr. Jensen.
I think the theory of CAPS is awesome. It gives kids, if we can make it work like it's designed to work, give kids options that aren't available. I'm all for having lots of different options that maybe fall outside of the normal experience in school. I think it's a great idea. The challenge is going to be implementation. Can we make it work? Can we make it the logistics? Can we make the logistics come together? That's our challenge, but I very much support the concept of CAPS.
Thank you. We'll start with you, Mr. Applegate. The voters recently turned down a school district bond issue that was to fund safety equipment, a science and technology building, equipment for the CAPS campus, and swimming pools. Did you support this list of needs, and how would you prioritize them? If so, where will you find the funding since the voters didn't give you any?
Yeah, so yes, I supported the bond issue. All of us on the board did, and I support it financially as well. But I also respect the will of the voters, and the will of the voters was that they did not want to support those items through an increase in taxes. So we are, as a board, we do have to prioritize, and the priority for me would be safety and CAPS equipment, and I believe that with our operational funds, we can fund a large percentage of the equipment and safety over the next several years. The immersion theater, which was going to replace the planetarium, I think is probably not a likely item at this point in time. And I still believe that there is a pool need. I don't know how we're going to get there with pools. I think we might have to do some sort of private-public partnership, but I'm open to trying to solve that problem and still provide pools for our high school students.
Ms. McCullar.
I did not vote for the bond issue. And it's not that I don't support what's best for kids, but I feel like there's lots of money in the district that we do not allocate in ways that we do what's often best for kids. I think we could find funds for some of those things. I know in terms of swimming, yes, that's important. PE is important. But I also know that there's a citizens committee that's interested in building an Olympic-sized pool, and I can envision a partnership between the district and that committee to really give kids the best. I know that that's the way they've done a lot of projects in Gillette for their enhancements, and I would look towards doing some things like that.
Mr. Jensen.
I was the co-chairman of the bond committee, one of the co-chairmans, and so I definitely supported the bond. My original interest was through the pools. My kids are swimmers, competitive swimmers, and they've done really well. But this summer we had a drowning in the river. I was asked to participate in a city forum to try to figure out how we could prevent drownings from happening. Part of it is education. A big part of it is education. How do you educate kids about water safety if you don't have a pool in Natrona County? That's one of the issues. That's not the only issue. How do we fund it? I have no idea. I hope to figure that out.
Thank you. Ms. Billings?
Well, I was out of town and did not vote for or against the bond issue, but in theory I support it and did support it, primarily because I have a really hard time saying no to things that are for kids. And I don't fully understand everything that was covered in it. I felt there was a lot of negativity surrounding it at the time that kind of got stirred up at the last minute that made me question it, and I didn't really understand all of that, and we were, I really assumed it would pass because things like that usually do in Natrona County, and so what I think I heard from the voters was that they weren't in support of that and they don't want that, and so my feeling is that, you know, if the money is there in another way, I would want to find out, you know, is it that the community doesn't want a pool? I mean, what really is the core issue here, and how do we not just go around the back door and fund things that people have said they don't want, and to find out which things it is that people were offended or against or whatever in that issue. So,
Thank you. We're going to switch to some curriculum questions because the audience seemed to have a lot of interest in those issues. Are you familiar with the dual language immersion program, and do you support its continued growth? We'll start with you, Ms. McCullar.
Well, I support school of choice, and that is a choice that's been made. I think that there are kids that are enrolled in that. I know that the easiest time for kids to acquire language is when they're young, so I think it's a good start, and I do support it.
Mr. Jensen.
We always have more need than we have resources to do. And so, in theory, I support the dual language immersion. I think it sounds like a great opportunity. What I'd have to find out is, can we afford it? I'm not sure what resources we have to do something like that, and I'd need to find out about those resources before I could say yes or no, but it seems like a good idea to me right now.
Ms. Billings.
well, I have a granddaughter, as I mentioned, and it's one of the things that has engaged her mother in the opportunity of bringing her child into the public school system is the dual language immersion. Her father is Puerto Rican and speaks Spanish, and she's so excited to tell her daddy that when I go to school, I'm going to be speaking Spanish just like you, Daddy. And so, I think it is an opportune time to teach our children another language. I think that's an opportunity if we can offer that to families, and it's something that families in Natrona County want, and that the program is full and we have the funding for it. I would support that entirely if it became something that we could not afford, or something that did not have enough enrollment to justify it. Then I would think that would be a poor decision.
And Mr. Applegate.
Yeah, thanks. I support a dual language immersion. Like Clark, I think I had questions about, implementation and cost, and we asked those questions, and I believe as a board, and even myself in particular, we scaled that back and pushed to scale that back the first year for an implementation perspective. Let's try it in one school and see if it works. And so we did Paradise Valley with Chinese. It has worked. There's been tremendous support for it, not only to get it going, but in its first year, now it's in its second year, and they're doing, Park is doing Spanish. So I think dual language immersion is really a cool thing. Again, it goes to the idea that we have school of choice here. It was really driven by parents, which we've had a couple items that have come for us in the board, and I think when you have a parent-driven initiative, it usually is successful. So I'm a supporter. I think it's really unique that we have it in this district. Now, whether or not it can grow to other schools, I think is really dependent on us maintaining success at Park and Paradise Valley.
You're out of time. Let's start with Mr. Jensen this time. The board adopted a district-wide math curriculum in 2013. Should there be the same standard curriculum and instruction for other subjects, such as English, history, whatever?
I'm not sure I understand exactly what you're asking. I'm not familiar with the standard. I think there needs to be a standard. I am definitely supportive of standards being driven by the community, and I'm very much opposed to the standards being dictated from Washington. I think that we need to have standards for sure. So yes, that sounds reasonable to me.
Ms. Billings?
Well, I retired shortly before that adoption, and so I don't have firsthand experience as a teacher with that. However, I do have a lot of teacher acquaintances and friends who are still in the district, and I think my biggest objection to that is that it seems to sort of go against our philosophy of schools of choice, in that we say we have schools of choice, but then we have mandated this curriculum that's kind of a one-size-fits-all. I don't know how much flexibility there is within buildings for those teachers, if they have the opportunity to match that to their particular program or their school's particular goals, or if it's just you have to teach this and everybody needs to be on page 9 on the 9th of January. I'm not familiar with how much structure is being given to the implementation of that program. So that would be something I would want to know as far as how that's being fully implemented.
Mr. Applegate?
Yeah, I support the district-wide initiative for the math curriculum, and I probably changed my mind on that as we went through that process. But with an open enrollment, kids change schools. They may be in an elementary over here and go to a middle school on the other side of town. So we have to have a standard such that all fourth graders are generally trying to get to the same place at the end of their fourth grade year. All sixth graders are generally trying to get to the same place. So we have some sort of consistency in terms of expectation. And I think the adoption of a single math curriculum, that was the intent. Now, you still have different teaching styles, different cultures at the schools. You can have Casper Classical Academy, which, is a more back-to-basics school, or you have choice still. You have dual language immersion. But this idea of all of us trying to reach the same standards each year, I think, is a good idea, and I would support it in other curriculum areas as well.
Ms. McCullar?
I don't know how you have effective instruction going on when you do not have district-wide curriculum. There needs to be both scope and sequence in what we teach our kids. And I can look back to the classroom when I started in 1976-77, and I was given what was called the Green Notebook, which listed all the skills that I was to be teaching as an 8th grade teacher, which built upon those that the 7th grade teachers taught and introduced the skills that the 9th grade teachers would be teaching. And to me, one of the most important things we can do is have good, strong, solid scope and sequence in curriculum district-wide.
Thank you. We'll start with you, Ms. Billings. What is your position on Common Core and the next generation science standards? Should they be incorporated into Natrona County School District?
Well, I agree that we need standards for education. You can't have effective education without that. I believe that the idea that generally we would have those across the states makes sense. That's not a ridiculous idea to me. The idea that it should be identical and be completely unforgiving of different areas, it to me is a problem, and that those mandates came from the federal government with limited or not a lot of input, and the fact that those are being implemented, and more, I understand, more importantly, the whole package, the data package and everything that goes with that changes it, is a concern for me. I think we need a curriculum that is consistent, but I think a curriculum is different than curriculum materials, the exact same books in every room, the exact same, that is where there's a difference. And the next generation science standards, I don't know about those. So
You're out of time. Mr. Applegate.
Well, 1 minute is not enough for this question.
That's a two-part
Very
question.
tough.
I thought about that after I asked
Let me
it.
just say, there's so much controversy around Common Core. It is, one, it's not a federal set of standards. It was developed by a group of different associations that don't have a federal connection. Now, unfortunately, the feds then supported it and tied grants to it, and I don't think that helped us at all. But if you just look at the math and English standards and you just read them, they're just rigorous standards. And the intent was to increase the standards. And standards are passed by the State Board of Education, not local school boards. We take state standards and we select curriculum to meet those standards. So there's sort of a lot of confusion around this. And so generally, let me just say, I think the state of Wyoming at the Board of Education level adopted Common Core for English and math. They're good, rigorous standards. Now let us go through the process of selecting curriculum. And on next generation science standards, I'll wait for another question because I can't answer that in 10 seconds.
Okay. Ms. McCullar.
I'm certainly in favor of high standards. I'm not in favor of Common Core, and it really wasn't developed by subject matter or professional organizations out there. I was a reviewer of Common Core when I served on the executive committee for NCTE. And I can tell you that most of the recommendations we made were not incorporated. As I look at this, I believe that the only winners are going to be the test companies and the book publishers in this country.
Mr. Jensen.
Seems like it's a consensus. I'm not supporting Common Core either. The 10th Amendment in the Constitution says that all powers and authorities not specifically given to the federal government by the Constitution are reserved to the states and to the people. Education isn't part of the Constitution. It isn't mentioned there. I think that education constitutionally rests with the states and the people, and should, but it doesn't right now. That isn't where we sit. And so the Federal Board of Education has sent down multiple programs over the years. No Child Left Behind. Common Core is just the last of the bunch. And historically, they don't work. I'm also concerned about those kinds of programs becoming a political football for somebody. I don't want that to happen. Control for education needs to be on the local level, on the state level. I don't want Washington to do it.
Thank you. Let's bifurcate this question. I think asking separately about the next generation science standards is probably a pertinent use of your time. So we'll start with you, Mr. Applegate.
Yeah.
Tell us about the
So
next
again,
generation science standards and what's your position on those?
Yeah, I just want to, again, be clear. The Common Core standards are not a federal mandate. And so I think we need to be clear on that. They were adopted by the State Board of Education. They have not adopted the next generation science standards. That became very controversial this last year, and the legislature put a footnote in that they couldn't work on that. The next generation science standards, although when I said I supported the math and language almost 100%, I would say on the next generation science standards, I'm probably 95%. I do think, the state has the ability to make some modifications to those. In general, the next generation science standards have a very strong framework, and I'm just going to mention this. It's content, conceptual thinking, application. They've added in this engineering. It's very rigorous, and they're good standards. There is controversial language, in my opinion, surrounding evolution and climate change, which again takes a lot more than a minute to talk about. And I wish I could expound on those two things because I believe in evolution and the potential for climate change. But I think you can write the standards in such a way that you accommodate different worldviews and don't offend people. And I'm not sure they do that in the
You're out of
standards.
time. Ms. McCullar, the next generation science standards.
And I don't know enough about them to be on one side or the other at this point. I was a terrible science student when I was growing up, and I haven't really developed an interest in a lot of it to date.
Dr. Jensen.
Like I said, I don't want the standards to come from the federal government. That's part of my concern. I'm not opposed to high standards. I'm not opposed to having a statewide standard at all, nor am I opposed to rigor in those standards. I just don't want to lose control of what those standards are or how the curriculum is structured. I don't want to lose that.
And Ms. Billings?
Well, and I'm not familiar with the science standards specifically, other than the fact that I think they are at the opposite end of the Common Core to some degree. The Common Core, when I was a second grade teacher, was delivered, and it was reading and math, and they were strictly, I mean, there wasn't anything in there that as a second grade teacher I went, oh my gosh. It was all very realistic, and yes, it was rigorous, and not every child was probably going to get there, but I was going to give it a try, and there wasn't anything in there that was offensive to me as a second grade teacher or unrealistic. Science is a whole nother ballgame, and I think there's a lot of emotion around few subjects, and I think that changes it. And so from that perspective, I think we have to look at that very closely as a community and look at that very closely as a state to whether or not we want to adopt something that we didn't necessarily create, because I believe the control rests with us.
Thank you. Let's shift gears a little bit. Do you support the district school of choice model? We'll start with you, Ms. McCullar.
I do support the district school of choice model. In fact, as I read the paper yesterday about the wish for a charter school, I was reminded that we do have a district of choice, and so it's caused me to do more thinking about how I feel about charter schools. I have always been a proponent of neighborhood schools. I thought that was really important, but as time goes on, I think that the various schools have different things to offer for kids.
Dr. Jensen?
Yes, I support schools of choice. I think freedom is always a good thing.
Thank you. Ms. Billings?
Well, I was hired in this district right at the beginning of Schools of Choice, and there was a lot going on about that. And I recall a lot of the negativity around it, and growing up here with a neighborhood school, I worried that my children wouldn't have that because of Schools of Choice. And so that was hard for me, and I think a lot of the sort of the negativity around it has settled. I think people in this community support it and expect it, and I think it's a good thing in a lot of ways. It gives parents that want to have that opportunity to go out and investigate what is best for their children. I think neighborhood school preference is important. I think that if you live right next door to a school and that's where you want your child to go, that it seems kind of silly. You'd have to take them somewhere far away. But I generally do support it, and I think that anytime you pick something, you're going to love it a lot more than if somebody makes you have it. And so I think we've got a lot more buy-in from our parents because they are invested on that level.
Mr.
I think it's
Applegate?
unanimous. We all support school of choice. I do as well. The board I've been on the last 4 years, one of the things that I'm sort of proud of, and I'll give credit to Rita, I see her in the audience, she had always been a strong proponent of the neighborhood. And I think school of choice allows you to choose the neighborhood school. And we've done that with our family. But there was a time a few years ago where there was trouble getting into one of the schools, and we had a lot of parents come to us, and we added a neighborhood preference to the open enrollment. So that was us solving a problem where we said, okay, if you choose your neighborhood school, we're going to give you a little higher priority than someone who might be coming from a further distance. So I support open enrollment. We've tried to tackle the neighborhood concept by adding a preference to open enrollment, and I think it's good for our community.
We'll start with Dr. Jensen. One of the negatives you hear about schools of choice is the cost of busing. If the cost of busing were to become a district responsibility, would that change your position on schools of choice?
I think I read in the newspaper that they did a study on the cost of busing, and it really wasn't substantially different than what it would be if we didn't have schools of choice. So I don't think I'm concerned about that, but I would rather drive my kid to the school that I wanted him to go to than lose the opportunity to choose which school he should attend or wanted to attend. So no, I don't think I would change my opinion if the cost changed.
Ms. Billings?
I don't feel like I would change my opinion either unless it were a substantial difference. I understand that the hub system is the board and the district's collaborative effort to try to make the busing more efficient. I know initially it wasn't that successful, but most new things aren't at the very beginning. It takes a while to work out the kinks, and I don't know where that sits now. I know several people came to me and said, "You're running for the school board, fix the busing problem." And I was like, I'm not even on the board yet, but okay. So I know that that is a concern of our people in our community, and I think that if it became exorbitant, we would have to look into that. We would have to think about that. But otherwise, I think the benefits outweigh, some additional cost for the district.
Mr. Applegate.
Yeah, the board a couple years ago asked that same question, and we had the district do an analysis for us, and it said that basically our busing costs were equivalent to the Cheyenne schools where they don't have school of choice. And then that was validated recently in a newspaper article where they looked at that independently. That was in the paper about a month ago. So I don't think there's evidence to suggest that it's more expensive. And I guess I want to commend some of the operational staff at the district who came up with the bus hub concept. Again, it's going to take some time to evaluate its effectiveness, but at least conceptually, there's a belief that it's going to make a substantial reduction in travel times and transportation costs. So to me, that's sort of the spirit that I want the board to bring to issues is, yeah, let's do better. Let's continue to look at things, and there's an example of the district trying to do better, and I think hopefully it'll prove out over time.
Ms. McCullar.
Well, another question where it's unanimous. I would support schools of choice if the funding went away, but I would also hope that the community would be a part of coming up with a decision as to how we would work without being able, that it shouldn't just cost the district millions more to bus kids. I don't think that would be the most effective use of our money. If we can get parents to help drive them, whatever, I think that you'd have to look at, different alternatives.
Thank you. We'll start with you, Ms. Billings. The community is aware of a number of personnel issues in the district that seem to reflect poorly on the ethics and morality of some school district personnel. Rather than termination, these individuals seem to be usually reassigned. Do you support this solution? What would you as a school board member insist that a school district, when would you as a school board member insist that a school district employee be fired? So this is kind of a two-part question. I think we're going to give you 2 minutes for this one because it's apparently a big community issue. Essentially what we're asking is, how would you handle a situation like the recent skit at Natrona County School District, and what would be your criteria for firing a school district employee? And you have 2 minutes for this one.
Well, that's a big question for someone who's never been on a school board, but I guess if I went with my gut feeling on it, I would say clearly if somebody has behaved in an unethical manner, that there would be a couple things that would need to be taken into consideration. The level, the scope, the severity of that. I think anybody's capable of an unethical moment. And I think that once you look at the severity of that the next thing has to be, is this repeated? And I don't feel like ever an unethical decision should be rewarded with a promotion or a better job. I don't feel that is right or fair, and I think that is the perception of the public, and whether or not that is the reality of what's happening or is going to happen with this current situation, if that's the perception of the community, then that's something that needs to be addressed by the district, by the board, so that people understand fully what is happening. And I think sometimes in an effort to protect people, information isn't shared, and then I think it just leaves people to make assumptions and jump to conclusions. And I know people have, said that to me, and I think that that's not right. At the same time, moving someone out of a position where they will no longer, be in that same realm, if they still have values and a skill set for the district in another area, then, perhaps that is a good move. But I do feel like there are times when there is no option other than if the severity and of the situation is such, then I feel the person should be terminated. They shouldn't be protected by any specific thing from that.
Mr. Applegate?
So I suppose that's a tough question for an incumbent, right? Let me just say the skit was inappropriate, period. I think the resignation by Principal Kelly was the right thing to do. As a board, we hire and fire one employee, the superintendent. We hired a man of impeccable character who I think is doing an outstanding job. He brought to us the full range of considerations as he would do in any situation that has to do with employees that has this sort of high-profile nature. He weighs all sorts of different options, their past performance, the severity of you said, of the incident, statutory requirements. There's statutory requirements on how one goes about dismissing a teacher. Teachers, as they should be, are protected by statutory requirements, so they're not, just removed by the public if the public doesn't like them for some reason. So there's good reason why they have statutory protection. They also have work agreement protections that have been negotiated over time. So all of these considerations had to be taken into place on any sort of personnel issue. And unfortunately, the board doesn't have the ability to talk about all of those issues publicly. You elect us to show good judgment, and to show good judgment in the hiring of a superintendent, and to have good judgment in the evaluation of that superintendent's decision-making. We have done that in this situation, and I feel like he made the right decision in all aspects of it.
Thank you. Ms. McCullar?
I also agree with the decision that Superintendent Hopkins made. I don't think it's just the community in general that's horrified by these things. Teachers have been horrified as well. And we, have watched over years these little affairs that take place, and there's not much that one can do about it. I wish that there was some test you could give people that measured the amount of integrity that they have, but there isn't. I wish that people understood that if you want to move outside of your marriage, that you get divorced first, but we don't have any control over those things. As teachers, we are protected. If you have a principal who is dismissed and he's been a teacher in the district, you are bound to put them back in the system. You can't just arbitrarily get rid of them. So I guess I would hope that we can have these conversations when people are being hired, in terms of integrity.
Dr. Jensen?
The skit was unfortunate. It was bad judgment for sure. Teachers and administrators, like it or not, are role models. I don't really know if I understand what the standard is for conduct for a teacher in the district. I don't know if that's defined someplace. And I don't know if we've defined the consequences if somebody steps outside of that standard. I would like to know the answer to that. I guess I'm not answering questions, I'm asking questions. But I do have a lot of confidence in Superintendent Hopkins. I do have a lot of confidence in the existing board. Those are tough questions, and it's easy to second guess why they did what they did, but I have confidence that they're good people doing the best that they know how to do with the circumstances in front of them. But I do think we need to elevate our standard, and we do need to recognize that teachers are role models and they need to act like them.
Thank you. Those things said, this is a question from a student in the audience. And they'd like to know what you think about a secular class in high school that teaches about the world's religion, including atheism. And I would broaden that a little bit to what do you see as the school board's position on picking curriculum? We'll start with you, Mr. Applegate.
Well, I would support such a class as an elective that kids could choose to take, and it sounds like a religious studies or philosophy class that would require critical thinking, and so I would think that would be a good thing. So if there was interest it would take probably more than one student, but usually if there's coalescing interest around a topic, we would take seriously that suggestion. And I just certainly don't see anything wrong with teaching a religious studies class in a high school system.
Ms. McCullar?
And I would agree with that. I think that when you look at the world, what's going on around religion, that it is important for us to understand various religions that are out there. So yes, I'd support that.
Dr. Jensen?
It seems to me like we're terrified of the idea of separation of church and state but being violated. But I don't think we need to be so terrified of learning about other people's beliefs. That seems like a normal sort of thing to do. And if we understood, for example, the Muslim faith, we might have a better understanding of world problems that we face. I definitely think that such a class could have its benefits. I think we can do that without breaching this separation of church and state. So yeah, that sounds like a great idea if, like Dave said, if there was enough interest in that sort of a topic.
And Ms. Billings?
I would also support that. I would agree that if there were enough students that were interested in that, and if it were a course that taught about all different types of religion, then it is more of a religious studies class, not specifically a religious class, which would only teach one religion, and would allow students, especially at the high school level, who are about to go out into the world anyway and have the opportunity to make their own religious choices, that giving them that broad spectrum might actually increase their faith, which I think is sometimes what draws people away from that type of education. And I think giving them that broad spectrum would give them an opportunity to know about a lot of things. And I think it'd be good for a lot of people to have that kind of broad spectrum, really. So I would support that. I don't know that I feel that that's a school board decision necessarily. I don't know if the school board, Mr. Applegate, could probably speak to that, makes curriculum decisions. I think that comes more at the school level, but I would support it.
Thank you. Since you mentioned charter schools, we'll start with you, Ms. McCullar, on this question. There's a new initiative to start a charter school for gifted and talented children in the district. Would you support such a charter school?
I would support polling the community to find out what their feelings are about charter schools, and I would support a very deliberative kind of process in determining an answer for that. I think that personally, I believe in public schools, and I think charter schools sometimes draw certain kinds of kids, those who are high achieving, who have parent support, and put them in their own place. And I think those things are necessary in the public school as well. So being a school district of choice, I would think that it's something that we should deliberate about and get community input for.
Dr. Jensen?
My gut reaction is no, I wouldn't support that. The idea that we have a school for snobs doesn't appeal to me. If we have, maybe that didn't sound right, but if we have a school that's dedicated to those that are the smartest and the brightest, the tendency is maybe to look down upon those who aren't there. I'm concerned about that. I think we have options already in place for excellence in education. The CAPS program, isn't that what that's all about? Do we need to take all of those smartest kids who can be leaven to the rest of their classmates and set the standard where they're at? Do we want to take those people away and put them in one place, or do we want them to be part of the whole district? I think we want them to be spread throughout the whole school district.
Thank you. Ms. Billings?
Well, I would think it would be a decision that would need to be definitely considered very carefully. I think opening the charter school door is a whole issue on itself. I do feel that having specific classes for children with specific needs, like gifted and talented children, is an important thing. I think we have that currently in the district, that those children have the opportunity to test into those programs and receive those services. And I feel that the classroom I taught in was a very diversified classroom, and I think that children learn from stretching to meet what they might see in another student, and they help each other. And I think that there's a collaborative environment that if you just level kids out and put all the gifted and talented and all the medium level kids and all the low kids, you take away some of that diversification. And so I would think that would be a decision that would need a lot of consideration.
Mr. Applegate?
So this would be like many of the problems that we've had to face on the board. You know, you come to an issue and you don't really fully understand all of the details around it, and you have to gather information. I mean, my gut feel is I'm for excellence in whatever form it comes. If there's a group of parents that want to start a charter school, I don't have an initial adverse reaction to that. We haven't had to deal with a charter school before, so I'd want to understand it. Generally speaking, I think if you have parents that coalesce behind an idea, it usually has pretty good momentum. Do I think we're going to really damage our district if we have one charter school with 300 kids in it? I don't. So I'm very open-minded to the possibility of the charter school. I want to learn more about it, what their intentions are. I think there's a pretty rigorous process that we have to go through and that they have to go through. And yeah, I'm open-minded to it.
Thank you. We'll start with you, Dr. Jensen. On kind of the other side of the coin, the school district has special education services for language therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, social services. Do you think those programs need improvement, or is the school district doing enough for students that need special ed services?
I don't know enough to answer that question. I'm not sure. I could find out, but right now I don't have an opinion.
Ms. Billings?
Well, from my experience in my particular elementary school, I feel like those students' needs were met. There were a lot of opportunities, there was a lot of specialists, there was a lot of special services for those children, but that's a limited perspective, so I would need to know generally how that is in the district, and if parents are feeling their children's needs are being met, and if teachers feel like their students are getting the services they need or not. I would want to know from their perspective, because my perspective would be limited to just my own experience. So,
Mr. Applegate?
Yeah, you know, I guess I'd maybe suggest there'd be two lines of evidence for me that would suggest that we're doing okay. You know, one, we haven't had a lot of complaints, and, you know, we do put a fair amount of resources to that issue. It's about 15% of our population, 1,800 students that have some form of special education. It's not insignificant. Now, some anecdotal responses to that, I know some parents that have special education kids and they seemed pleased with the district. And I want to kind of give a kudos to Kelly Walsh, where my kids go to high school. I think they have a tremendous kind of embrace of special needs kids. I have a son that was on the Kelly Walsh basketball team, and if you notice the last couple of years, there's been a couple special need boys that sit on that bench and who are part of that team, and they really try to have a culture there of embracing those kids. And so I generally think the district's doing a pretty good job in that area.
Ms. McCullar?
I also think the district's doing a good job. In fact, I believe that we allocate more resources to our special ed kids than we do to our regular level kids or our advanced level kids. I know that there are a myriad of professionals that work with them to meet their needs.
Thank you. We'll start with you, Ms. Billings. Is too much time spent on testing?
the question, the bomb. Yes. I feel like we spend too much time on either testing or preparing to test, or looking at the results after we tested, or setting goals for the testing and then reviewing the data after we tested. And I feel like, especially I taught second grade, that for 7-year-olds, the sheer length of the test, it wasn't so much the occurrence of the testing. I liked that we tested 3 times of the year, but I felt that, 52 questions for a 7-year-old, 3 different tests was just too much. Their attention was gone, and their commitment to it was really hard to get buy-in from a 7-year-old to sit there for 52 questions. It was just really a long time. So,
Mr. Applegate?
Well, this is one of those areas where, see, I have expertise right next to me, so I would take into account her opinion. And I have kids that always come home and complain about the testing, right? it's funny because I was asking some questions about this today, anticipating that that might be a question tonight. And I'm not sure I can fully answer it. I think we do testing for various reasons, right? In grade school, we do the NWEA to help place kids in math and reading, and I think that's pretty good testing. You know, it helps us know where kids are at and know where to place them in what reading groups and that type of thing. And then when we get in high school, we obviously have the Plan, Explore, and ACT tests, which ACT, of course, we all know is for getting into college. So that testing is hard to avoid. And the last one I'll say is pause testing, again, would require another couple minutes to talk about because it's been a flawed testing regime, and it's part of the state accountability model. So these different testing regimes sort of need to be evaluated on their own merits because they all sort of serve different needs.
Thank you. Ms. McCullar?
Yes, we do too much testing, most of which don't benefit teachers in instruction. When we give pause tests to kids, we don't see the results until well after the kids have left our classroom. I would venture to say that those of you that went to school before standards-based education were still taking tests, but they were developed by teachers. You took pre-tests, you took post-tests, they were authentic, and teachers can tell you where a child is, whether they're proficient, whether they're advanced proficient, before you ever see the results of any tests that are coming back. So we need to not only do away with testing or as many tests as we give.
Dr. Jensen?
My kids would say there's too much testing. I fear that I have a lot of patients who are teachers, and I ask these kinds of questions about how they would like to see their lives changed in the classroom, and a lot of teachers say they spend so much time trying to jump through hoops that their creative energies are sucked up before they get to really work with kids. I think we need to allow teachers to teach. I think we need to let the experts do what they do and what they're trained to do. And so I fear that too much testing makes it difficult for a teacher to do what he went to school for, and that is to teach the kids.
Thank you. We'll start with you, Mr. Applegate. There seems to be a shift in using tests to measure student proficiency, away from using tests to measure student proficiency and turning the test into a tool to measure teacher proficiency. What do you think about that? Is that a good idea or a bad idea?
I think that's a bad idea. I don't think that the tests are a good way to measure teacher effectiveness. I think it's good. You know, I've worked in professional organizations myself my whole career, and I've always been evaluated by my supervisor with a very rigorous evaluation tool, and that involves setting goals and check-ins periodically and an evaluation by that supervisor at the end of the year. And that's how teachers should be evaluated, by their supervisor. And in organizations like I work for, you have 360 evaluations or bottom-up. I mean, I think the district can maybe become more rigorous and sophisticated in their evaluation process, and I think they're moving that direction under Superintendent Hopkins. But I don't think using test scores is at all an appropriate way to measure a teacher's effectiveness.
Ms. McCullar?
And I am going to just reiterate that. I would not want to be evaluated by what my kids did on a test. And that has nothing to do with whether I'm teaching what needs to be taught for them to take that test, but I have no control over the results. I have only control over what happens in my classroom. If I'm giving them the NWEA test, there are 35,000 questions in that bank. As a teacher, how do I address 35,000 questions? You know, I can't. I can follow the curriculum and should follow the curriculum and end it there.
Dr. Jensen?
No, I don't think we should evaluate teachers based on a test either. There's too many intangibles in teaching that you can't measure, who's going to design the perfect test? I think it's impossible to do that. No tests are perfect, and the classroom demographics are different from one teacher to another. How can you use different demographics to say this teacher was good, this teacher wasn't good, when they don't have equal populations? So no, it doesn't make sense.
And Ms. Billings?
For the lack of anything more to add that they didn't already say, is I would not think that teacher evaluations based on testing is a fair or good practice.
Thank you. We've managed to get all the way through this forum almost without asking any sport questions. So I think it's really important we ask at least one sport question. The renovations of NC and Kelly Walsh included tearing down large gyms, and the result is that now apparently our sports teams are having practices early in the morning or late in the evening to try to accommodate the space. What are your thoughts about that? Let's start with you, Ms. McCullar.
Planning. You know, I think that we have good ideas on what we want to do, but we don't think about the repercussions all the time. Our swimmers went through this when they've been working on pools and coming in early. I think that, I don't know. I don't have a solution for what you do now. We're in the middle of building, and I don't know where you go with teams if you cannot. You can put them at CY, you can, put them in the junior highs, but it's difficult because space is an issue. That's why we're building.
Dr. Jensen.
Well, it's easy to look backwards and second guess somebody else's decision. I'm not going to do that. I don't know all of the ramifications for why we did what we did in the building of the schools the way we did. We can only look forward and say, what can we do better? What can we do to make opportunities happen for our kids in the future? And so I'm definitely a supporter of athletics and sports. I think there's some things that are learned on the athletic field or in the swimming pool or in the tennis court that you don't learn in the classroom. And so we need to find opportunities for our kids to participate in multiple different venues, not just football, basketball, and track, but band, drama, all of that.
Ms. Billings.
Well, I can't look back and judge because I have no idea. I'm sure planning the construction for 2 high schools at once was probably an undertaking that even people with experience probably made their head spin. So I feel like we are where we are, and I know that some buildings have not been torn down yet, is my understanding, and I would say let's don't rip anything down until we know we have the money to replace it. And I think extracurricular activities are crucial. A lot of times that's what keeps kids in school. They go to school, they get good grades because they want to play basketball or they want to run track. And so I think we definitely need to support that venue and support our students in that, and look forward now to how do we fix where we are.
And Mr. Applegate.
Oh, again, a minute is hardly enough. I know too much detail on this one.
He's got a whole notebook.
So let me just say that generally speaking, there is sort of a flawed assertion in a way, because the gyms were the gym space was not enough, and that's why we did the construction. So kids were having to practice early and late before we started construction. We have torn down no gymnasium at Kelly Walsh. In fact, we have a trustee who's here tonight who's a real advocate for keeping the Kelly Walsh gyms, and the board is maintaining dialogue about that interest. So we've lost no gymnasiums at Kelly Walsh. At NC, which is one of the most complex construction projects ever done at a high school in Wyoming, we built a swing space to accommodate gym space for what was going to be torn down at NC, and then we put money into the CY gyms this year to maintain those and keep those available for high school students. So the reality is we have not had enough gym space for a number of years, and we're going to continue to struggle through this construction period. And when the construction's finished, we're going to have extra gym space at both high schools.
Time's up.
Thanks for letting me get that last word in.
That's because I didn't speak fast enough. What kind of relationship should the district and its board have with the community at large, and with the parents and families. We'll start with you, Dr. Jensen.
From a parent's perspective, I've been frustrated at times in the past when I feel like my voice wasn't heard and that some of my concerns about my kids and their education wasn't heard like it needed to be. And so I think that we need to be very willing to listen to the parents of the kids we're teaching. The primary responsibility for that child is not the school, it's the parents. And we need to be cognizant of that always.
Ms. Billings.
I think the relationship needs to be collaborative for sure. I know that there's been a lot of movement in the district for transparency, and I think that's really important. I think parents, I think a lot of times if a parent's upset about something or confused about something, if they, understand the workings of all of the factors at play, it's not always as simple as what's going on for their student in their house or their school. And so I think if we have a collaborative atmosphere where parents feel welcome to come and talk and feel like they're listened to and that their concerns are validated, and the same thing goes for the community at large, then I feel like that gives us an opportunity to work together as a team, which is what I would hope to see as more of a collaborative effort amongst all of the stakeholders. So,
Mr. Applegate.
Yeah, we always need to work at that. It's constant effort to try to be transparent and to work. I've mentioned several times I have my own kids in the district. I have my own frustrations. In fact, when you have 12,000 kids and all those parents and all those teachers, every day there's interactions that are less than ideal. And I've had my fair share of them, and we call teachers, and I always say, I'm calling as a parent, not as a board member, but what's going on? And that's sort of the nature of the system. That doesn't mean we don't have to always try to make it better and listen. I think the board tries to do that. We sometimes, maybe you don't react as quick as you think because you just don't fully understand the issue, but I know we're always open to hear public comment. We've tried to be responsive, whether it be the dual language immersion, the open enrollment, neighborhood preference. We tried to listen on the pools. Clark came to us regarding, he was a strong supporter of adding the pools to the bond issue, and we listened. Now, we later on listened to the outcome of the election, but at that point in time, we were listening to the 200 swim parents that came to our board meeting asking us to include that.
You're out of time. Ms. McCullar.
I think collaboration is extremely important. We need to keep the public informed about what's going on so that we do what's best for kids. I know that one of the goals of the school board is to work on collaborative relationships, and I think that we probably could brainstorm ways to improve communication around that area.
Thank you. As I'm preparing these forums, I always look at the questions I asked 2 years ago, and 2 years before that, and 2 years before that. And this next question is one I've been asking for almost every year I've done candidate forums for school board candidates. The district graduation rates are still shy of 80%, in spite of the large amount of state budget devoted to education. Do you have any new ideas about how to fix that? We'll start with Ms. Billings.
well, I wish I could say that I did. I think that the way to get new ideas is to try to look outside of the box that you've been operating in any given situation. And I think that part of that comes from, I would be interested in finding out from parents whose children have dropped out or have quit. What is the motivation? Why are those kids leaving? I don't know the answer to those questions, and I would want to know that. I would want to know why students are leaving our district. I would want to know what we could do, and I don't think that's a high school problem. I think that begins as early as kindergarten. Children become engaged in school, and and I also think it begins even before that. It begins in the home. It begins with parents. It begins with parents valuing education and teaching their children that. And so how do we as a community get behind that? And I think part of that is being collaborative and allowing parents to have a voice in what's going on.
Mr. Applegate.
Yeah, it's a good question that you ask it every time because it's incredibly important. It's sort of a tough nut to crack because as a nation we're sort of stabilized at 80% for the last 30 years. But some districts do better. Some districts do better. So why can't we? I think we can. The board recently set an objective to get it to 85%. And when we went through that goal setting, we said, let's not create a platitude where we say we're going to graduate everyone. So then when we don't meet that goal, we can say it was unreachable. Let's have a goal that we can really push towards. And I'm thinking of 4 things that I think we're working on to try to get to that goal. One is the academies. It's about trying to engage kids when they hit the door as freshmen, although you're right, a lot of it happens before that. Activities, if kids are in activities, they have a 90% graduation rate. We need 9th graders to get 7 credits. We know if we can get 9th graders to get through that first year, they'll make it. And really, that goes all the way back to 3rd grade readers. If you can't read in 3rd grade, you're going to have a hard time all the way through. So we have to get those 3rd graders to read.
Out of time. Ms. McCullar.
Would you repeat that question again, Carol?
District graduation rates are still shy of 80% in spite of the large amount of the state budget devoted to education. Do you have any new ideas about how to get more students to graduate?
Well, I think that we need to be doing things that show our kids that we value having them there. There have been lots of programs through the years that I think help students make connections with adults in the building, and it's true that kids, in order to be successful, should have 5 adults in their lives because they spend so much time in school. I think that there are things that we can do as teachers, as staff in buildings to let our kids know that they're valued and that it's important to us that they're there. We need to be more student-centered and less data-driven.
Dr. Jensen.
You know, I really agree with what Deborah said, that it's all about relationships with kids, and I'm fearful that the relationships are hindered by too much bureaucracy or too many hoops that teachers have to jump through, that they don't have the time, the energy to sit down and work with the little boy who's on the outskirts of success. Certainly the graduation rates are a reflection of our community, and parents who have failed in life are going to have kids who tend to fail in life. It's hard to rescue those kids, but unless you can develop a relationship somewhere along the line with somebody who's meaningful, a teacher, that child won't be saved.
Thank you. Our goal was to finish around 8 o'clock, and I want to give you enough time to say everything that you didn't get to say as we were asking the questions. So starting with you, Mr. Applegate, wrap up what you want the voters to remember about why they should vote for you. If you are willing, include where you see education going under your leadership on the school board. And we're going to give you 3 minutes to do that so that you have plenty of time.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. For me, it's been a real privilege to serve on the board, and I would like and be privileged to serve 4 more years. You know, I think I bring a temperament that allows me to listen to stakeholders, a problem-solving mentality. I'm going to work hard, and I'm going to try to solve problems. I do have goals for the next 4 years. I think we've been trying to push towards a higher set of expectations in our district. We added 2 credits. One of those was financial literacy and civic responsibility. I think that was a move in the right direction. We're deploying academies because we're trying to get kids engaged, not just for the first 3 years, but to take full loads their senior year. It's amazing how many kids don't take full loads their senior year, and that really doesn't prepare you for the next step in life. I believe the Common Core standards are rigorous, and that is pushing our district towards a higher set of standards. We have more meaningful teacher evaluations that have been deployed the last year or so. We're going to continue to work on those. I know if I'm reelected, I'm going to push to have data on those shared with the community. How many teachers met expectations? How many teachers exceeded expectations? We need to sort of amp up the the evaluation process, not to be punitive, but to be beneficial. I have always benefited from a strong and rigorous evaluation process in my career, and we can help teachers by doing that, and we should do that. We need to meet our strategic goals of 85% of our kids reading at grade level in 3rd grade and increase these graduation rates. And one initiative I've talked to the superintendent about is this idea of increasing and revisiting as a community student expectations in general. I believe there's been this sort of downward set of expectations because of No Child Left Behind, this sort of idea that it's all about graduation rate. And so we've kind of lowered standards over the last couple decades to try to increase graduation rate when it's really about prepared graduates. And I think when it comes to whether it be attendance policy or homework policy, we need to review those things as a district. I know because I have kids in the district that some classes you can turn homework in, 3 or 4 weeks late and still get credit for it. And so we need to support teachers by having a district level policy that supports them when a parent comes in and says, hey, why'd my kid get no credit on this homework? They can show a district level policy that says, because you didn't turn it in on time. So I'm committed to higher expectations for all of us. We should be held accountable too, by the way, as on the school board. If we don't meet these goals collectively, then elect new school board members. But I think if we have high expectations for everyone in the system, we'll perform better. I think there's evidence in all sorts of institutions that support that.
Thank you. Ms. McCullar, 3 minutes to wrap it up and let us know where you think education's going.
Well, I hope it's going towards a more student-centered system, and that we use data in more limited ways, because it's really not those data points that are going to determine the success of our kids. I know that when I was in school, if I probably would have been written off based upon my attendance and my lack of engagement in the classroom. So I think that there are certain things we need to do that we can engage kids more fully. And to me, that again comes back to that relationship piece. I think like Mr. Applegate, we need to have high expectations, so we shouldn't have policies in the district like failure is not an option. I think it's very important for our kids to learn that failure is a consequence of not doing things that you need to be doing. I don't believe, I think it's really hard to know where our kids are going to be going in the workforce. We're trying to make up rules for a world that we don't even understand out there. I read most recently that we're going to be needing kids with skills. 40% of the jobs that are going to be coming up are skill-based. And I don't know how we can teach kids everything they need to know for a world that we don't even understand. I think it's important that we teach basic skills to our kids. I think it's important that they learn critical thinking and problem solving, and that we give them the opportunity to explore their strengths and work on their weaknesses, but to also grow in self-awareness, that we can somehow focus kids on setting goals for themselves, becoming captains of their ship, so that it's not what we've done to them, but what they're involved in doing for themselves.
Thank you. Dr. Jensen.
Vote for Dave.
That's a first, Dr. Jensen.
I recognize that there's very complex problems associated with what the school board has to deal with. These are not easy issues. The challenge of elevating education in Natrona County is not simple. And those who stick their head out and take a stand are going to take some arrows. I'm not really sure I'm looking forward to that, but I know that that's part of the process, that as we try to improve the educational process, that we're going to have people who are going to not understand all of the issues that we had to look at and deal with, but so be it. I'm willing to do what I need to do to try to help educate our kids. And so I care about kids. I want to see my grandkids have a better community than my kids had. And so if that's of any value to you, vote for me too.
Ms. Billings.
Well, it's not going to take me 3 minutes because I've used up all of my minutes every time, you might have noticed. So generally speaking, though, I guess my desire to do this, to run for this position, is a desire to get involved and to try to understand on a different level something that I dedicated my life to and that I very much love. And so from that perspective, someone once said, it was in a teacher in service, that changing education is kind of like turning the Titanic, and that doesn't happen on a dime. And so I think we're all really anxious for things to be different. I think we all want what's best for kids. I think we all want, teachers to be empowered. I think we all want a rigorous curriculum. I think we all want high standards. I think we all want our kids to graduate. We all want the same thing. And I think the tricky question is, how do you get there? And I don't sit before you with a set of answers. I don't have a set of answers, but I have a willingness to listen, a willingness to learn from people like Mr. Applegate, who has a lot of ideas and a lot of background, and work with a superintendent who I have a lot of respect for. And so from that perspective, I'm excited at the opportunity to try it. See if I can do this job. I don't know. You should vote for Dave, because I'm going to.
Dave, you got 2 votes.
You're already ahead.
Just vote for
This
the
is,
four of us.
this is really a first. This has never happened before, that I've had candidates endorsing other candidates. So more power to all of you.
I guess we have collaboration already down,
yeah.
would you say?
I want to thank the audience for coming. Again, thank you to the library and the League of Women Voters for making these forums possible. They are incredibly important. I would hope those who are not only here but also will watch online eventually on the library's website, please do vote. It's incredibly important that you vote, not only for the candidates, but there are issues on the ballot this year that are very important to this community. I would encourage you to do your research, go out and vote. You could go and vote tomorrow if you wanted to. So thanks again for your patience, for your putting up with my questions and the questions from the audience, and congratulations on being candidates. I'm very proud of you.
Well.